Hey, Yaakov and everybody. This week is Parshas Vayishlach, and we wanted to do a little story. So I'm going to tell you a story, and we'll get your raw reaction. So this is a really, really funny story with Reb Baruch of Mezhibuzh. Now, Reb Baruch of Mezhybizh is a character, right? He was a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, nachon?
Yep.
Grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, and quite a character. So one time, the holy Reb Baruch of Mezhibuzh, it's the middle of the night, and he calls out to his Chasidim that are near him. He says, Chevra, come here. So they said, okay. He says, I want you to go right now to my wife and get her to agree to accept a divorce from me, to accept a get from me. I want to divorce her. And you have to convince her to make a kinyan that the kinyan's going to say that tomorrow when I give her the get, she's going to accept the get. So it's as if it's already happening tonight. She's being makabel a kinyan that tomorrow she's going to be makabel a get from me. And the Chasidim were like, what? Like, are you serious? And he's like, right now. So they knew Reb Baruch, like, you got to do what he says. Like, you don't mess around with his stuff. So they quickly run over to her and they tell her, say, listen, would you agree to accept the get tomorrow from your husband? And so she says, listen, I always do what my husband wants, even if it sounds crazy. She's like, okay. They said, well, you have to make a kinyan that your mamish can accept the get tomorrow. So she does. So they come back to him, and Reb Baruch is sitting there, and he goes, it's not good. It's not good that a human being, a man, should be alone. It's not good that a Jew should live alone without a woman. What do you guys say? I should find myself a young girl, right, to get married to. Being single is not good for me. So the Chevra are like, okay. So he said, there's a village nearby. You know what? Mendel. Is one of our Chasidim, one of my Chasidim. Mendel lives there, and he has a beautiful daughter. So they said, yeah. He goes, she's like probably marriageable age, young, good looking. They said, yeah. He goes, do you think that her father would want me to marry his daughter? So the Chasidim were like, yeah, like, of course, you're the Rebbe. Like, you think he's not going to want it? He goes, really? Like, you really think that he's going to want it? Like, you're sure? So they said, dude, Mendel would love for you to marry his daughter. So he said, okay, I want you to be a shliach for him, because a shluchai shel adam k'maisai, and you're allowed to be zoicha for somebody, even shaloi b'fanav. So that means if you're going to do something good for somebody, you can mamash make a kinyan for him. So the guys are like getting a little uncomfortable. He goes, are you sure? Are you sure that he would want me to marry his daughter? And so they're like, yeah. They said, okay, let's make a t'naim. So quickly, of course, they write a whole t'naim up that, like, the Rebbe, Reb Baruch of Mezhibuzh, is going to marry the daughter of Mendel of this village. And they're making a star t'naim. The guys are like sweating a little under the shirts, like they're bugging out. A little unusual. Anyhow, they write up the t'naim. They have Eidim, they sign it, l'chaim or l'bracha, they drink a l'chaim together, they break a plate, the whole shebang. A few minutes later, they're all drinking l'chaims and eating a little booze, a little cake, in honor of the Tanam, such a special thing. The Rebbe looks up and he goes, my kala, you think it would be good if a Russia would kidnap and assault my kala? So they look at him, they go, are you kidding? He goes, you think I should break his legs? I should break his legs if he's gonna before he touches my kala, right? So they all go, yeah, of course. He goes, you guys all agree that if this Russia is gonna mess with my kala, his legs should be broken. You all agree? They said, yeah, for sure. So he says, amen, drink another l'chaim. So they all drink l'chaim. Yeah, the Russia tries to mess with the Rebbe's kala, his legs should be broken. So they all drink l'chaim. And Gewalt, they all knew the guy, Mendel, and they all knew his daughter, but like this Russia, like, didn't know what's going on. Anyhow, the Tzaddik sends them all home. And the next morning they wake up, and the Tzaddik calls his Chasidim in, and his wife comes in because she's supposed to be accepting a get. And he looks at her, and he looks at his Chasidim, he goes, if the guy that wanted to break my Kala's legs, like if his legs are already broken, do I really need to marry the girl? Right? You guys agree. I don't really need to marry her. So they go, yeah. He goes. So let's be mavatal the tanaim. And then he looks. He goes, and if I'm not marrying her, we should be mavatal this Kabbalah's get, right? Because like, who needs to have a? I don't need to divorce her if I'm not marrying another younger girl. They say, yeah, for sure. They break the tanaim. They rip up they undo the kinyan of the get the night before. Anyhow, later in the afternoon, who rolls into town but Mendel? And Mendel goes, you guys won't believe the story that I have to tell you. And they're like, okay, what happened? He says, so basically, guys, that there's this Russia in our town, and he's the son of the Parrots or whatever, and he's been talking with his friends for a long time that he's gonna kidnap and assault my daughter. And he's been saying, that beautiful girl, I'm gonna get her, yada yada yada. And he goes, and his friends have been hounding him, like, you're not gonna marry that girl, you're not kidnapping that Jewish girl. And he's like, I'm gonna get her. Here's what I'm gonna do. Inside of every home, they used to have this huge box that they would keep the grain in, and and even the grain they would put it in at the beginning of the winter, and when they harvest, and over the season they would have to slowly take it out, and then you'd mamish have to get into the box. The box was big enough that you would get into to get the bottom of the grain out. So he says, so in my little krechma, where I sell whiskey and stuff, I also have this big box. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to us, this Russia came in and he had a plan, and he climbed into the box, and he was going to wait there until it was late at night when I locked up the krechma, and he had a vial of I don't know, stuff that knocks you out to put you to sleep. Like, I don't know, a roofie. I don't know what you call it, but something that will really knock you out. And he had that with him. And he's like, he's going to wake up in the middle of the night, take my daughter, knock her out and assault her and do whatever he wanted. He goes, but in the evening, this guy pulled into town, and he had a huge wagon, and he had a huge box of all of his stuff. And one of the wheels of his wagon broke off. And he knocks on my crutch and he goes, listen, can you help me? He said, I can help you put your stuff away, but I can't fix your wheel. So he said, so what should I do? He said, listen, why don't you leave your stuff here and then you go to the next village. So he put the horses in the barn. He parked the 3-wheeled wagon outside, and all the heavy stuff, this huge box, he brought in, and we put it on top of the big grain box that we had that, unbeknownst to us, this Russia was hiding inside of. In the middle of the night, meanwhile, this guy takes his wheel and he goes to the next village to get his wheel fixed. In the middle of the night, the Russia gets up. He figured we're all sleeping, and he tries to push off the cover of the grain box, but he couldn't get out. And he's pushing harder and harder, and he's trying to pull himself out. He picks up the corner. He starts pulling his body out of the box, and the whole cover just cracks in half. This huge box of stuff crashes straight through, shatters both of his legs, and he starts yelling. And I mean howling. And we come in, and it's the middle of the night, and nobody wanted to come help me. Anyhow, the guy was screaming there for like 3 hours until morning. In the morning, the Goyim came also, and they all knew what was up. And they're like, the doctor comes in, and they all pick the box off the guy. And the guy is screaming. His legs are shattered. His bones weren't just broken, they were shattered. And the doctor looks and he goes, we need to amputate both of his legs. And they look there, and the guy is clutching this thing in his hand. They open his hand, and it's a vial of stuff that will mamish knock you out, put you unconscious for a couple hours. And the doctor looks at it, he goes, great thing he has this, because we need to amputate his legs. And they shove it in his mouth. He drinks it, goes unconscious, and they chopped off both of his legs. Is that crazy or what?
Yeah, it's a great story.
The holy Reb Baruch of Mezhibuzh. Mamish.
Some funny details there, though. Why do you have to? I don't know. I guess we don't really know how his magic works. If I could call it that, heretically call it magic.
Right.
His spiritual magic.
I wonder if it's like something like it's gotta be you, You gotta mamish find it in you. There's a term in tefillah called chilui. chiloi means, right, it's a Vayichal Moshe. And one of the
Yeah.
Lashonos is that you have to mamish. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu davened until he got sick from it. Another Lashon is that he davened until he himself, he was Moser Nefesh. And so the Medrash says that he had to daven, and he, before he was able to daven for Klal Yisrael, he had to find that issue in himself, and he found like one of his own kids that was going to be, a Kohen for Pesel Micha. And once he found that one of his own offsprings, that he found like that issue within himself, that there was going to be an issue of Avodah Zarah, then he was mamish able to daven for it. Sometimes, like, to get something into your rishus, to really daven for it, it's got to really affect you. It's got to really, like, until your mamish, until your mamish gets sick over it. Maybe, like, it had to mamish be the Reb Baruch of Mezhybuzh's kala for him to be able to, like, really, fight this guy off.
Yeah, but why was he allowed to rip up the Tanaim? Who gave him the right to do that? He already made a Tanam and he signed it. The only way the guy could be his shliach, right? Because Mendel wasn't there. It was one of the Chasidim acting on his behalf. How was he able to act on his behalf? Was the din zachan adam shlei b'fanav?
Right.
So how could they rip up the Tanaim?
That's a great question. I wonder if maybe it's because, like, what now that the guy saw, like he said, like, now that the Kala doesn't need this guy's legs broken, maybe she also would agree not to marry me.
Maybe.
Right, especially because I was only going to marry her for the sake of maybe it's like an aspect of like a Pesach for a neder.
Right, could be.
I don't know, but it's definitely
it's a good question.
Definitely a crazy story.
Right, but that's good. I like that point that he had to like have more of a shaychus to her to save her.
Right.
You can pull strings, but you have to be connected.
You can only pull strings for a karev,
Right.
The aspect was one of the aspects of being a pigeon. You do something for the tzaddik. The tzaddik could do something for you. You have to make a kesher. There has to be some kind of kesher between the two of you. All right, wonderful. Shkoyach Yaakov, everybody have a beautiful Shabbos. Be blessed.
Good Shabbos. Bye.